Shall we begin? Is there any others? Oh, no, I was looking at whether we had anybody online. We don't. Jen. Should we get started? Okay. I think I. Yeah.
Like campaign rally, get like an NBA crowd and then it's like the fingers.
Okay. Thank you for coming. We only have a few people here, so I hope that we can have a bit of a dialogue to make this most beneficial for you both that are here. You did? Okay, well, fair enough. It is a very similar or the exact same presentation. But I'm Christina Miller. I'm the city manager, and thank you for having me today. I also have a few of our department heads here tonight that will be assisting in the presentation to really provide the information and the depth of knowledge, hopefully, that you'll walk away with to make a well-informed decision for yourself. The city council asked the voters to consider a 1% sales tax measure as part of the November general election. That's a if you spent $1, that would mean that you would spend an additional penny if this tax is approved by the voters. And that's only on items that are subject to sales tax. In general, groceries are not subject to sales tax. It's typically items like when you go out to a restaurant or if you purchase clothing or pet food supplies, things of that nature in the community. Gas would also be subject to the Measure K tax if approved. And then just for some background knowledge, and you both might know this already, but prior to adoption of the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget, the city was experiencing over a $900,000 budget deficit. This is a structural deficit. The city does have healthy reserves, but we know that we need to address a problem. Otherwise, we're going to be facing very difficult decisions moving forward. I think it's important to note that this $900,000 deficit does not include any salary adjustments for employees. And we are currently in or just finalizing labor negotiations with 3 of our 4 bargaining units. And so while, one of the comments that we've heard is, well, then just don't provide salary adjustments to your employees. And that's very easy to say. And while I would agree to that in concept, the reality of such a decision is that when we already pay less than 6 of the 7 surrounding communities, if we do not give salary adjustments, we can expect to lose employees and have a very difficult time recruiting employees. And we have been experiencing that significantly within our fire department most recently. And then it also took us 3 rounds of recruitment to hire a single community service officer. And so because of pay, we're not attracting a good pool and we're also losing employees. So it's not helpful for the future success of this city to say no to salary increases if we want to retain our employees. I've been with the city for 1 year, and one of the things that I've become immediately aware of is that we don't have that knowledge base and that retention of knowledge that I experienced in my previous city. And it really is directly related to retention. In my previous city, I could go to my city clerk or my finance director or my finance staff, and they'd been there, there'd been somebody in each department that had been there for years and had a very strong working knowledge of the city. And here, unfortunately, we haven't experienced that to that depth, especially in some departments. And because of that, when we get posed questions or when issues come up, we spend a lot of time just digging through and trying to find records to understand why a decision was made in the past, what happened in the past, why it occurred. Whereas in my previous city, that was just something that I could just pick up, and it was a 5-minute question to an employee. And so I think those retention issues, we could really, really become more effective as an organization if we could resolve some of the retention issues that we're experiencing as a city. Understanding that there was a significant budget deficit, the city council directed staff to proceed with making recommendations for proposed cuts. And the city council ultimately chose to not fund a fire battalion chief position, a recreation supervisor position, a public works administrative assistant part-time position, a human resource analyst, deputy city clerk part-time position. They also approved several or significant operations and maintenance cuts to the fire department, including staffing. And then this resulted in a deficit of about $500,000, even with making those cuts. And I really want to emphasize how significant these cuts are. We already operate very thin. We are one of very few cities that rely on volunteers to staff at the administrative level, the front office for both our police and fire departments. The assistant city manager also serves as our only human resources employee, is also our only employee responsible for IT within the city, and she's also the deputy city clerk. That's a lot of roles for one employee, and to expect them to keep everything juggling in the air and be successful at all of those roles. And that's just one example. We also combined the public works and the community development director roles to save on costs. And so we've made considerable cuts and combinations and trying to really become as efficient as possible. But unfortunately, we're already at that point where it's very difficult to meet the expectations of the public, let alone provide additional services. And so the fear is that we're already in a situation where we pay the lowest of 6 of 7 cities. We're already operationally so thin that if Measure K doesn't pass, further cuts are going to be very difficult for the city to maintain existing services. It will not be possible, and there will be difficult conversations that will need to be had. So you might be asking, why do we need a sales tax measure? One of the things that we looked at was, well, where is our revenue at right now compared to a few years ago? We know that since COVID, there's been a significant rise in inflation. In fact, it's increased since 2021. It's increased 12.8%, while our general fund revenue during the same time period has only increased 3.4%. And so inflation's going up. Our revenue is not pacing with inflation. And so there's that delta. Well, mhm.
When did this mismanagement and money start happening? I don't know. These folks do deserve to make good money. You deserve to make good money. So what are we doing? Spending money on trees and decorations instead of what these people need so they can stay living in this town? I mean, we got Trilogy, my parents live there. There's a lot of money in here. I'm confused. I don't understand what's going on. I'm just now getting involved, but it seems pretty upsetting. It's like our government we have right now.
Sure.
You know, people that have been in the government their whole life,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's why I like Trump. Sorry, he's an asshole. Excuse me the way he talks, but he pays his own way. He doesn't rely on people, on the workers, because everybody's our employee, actually. So I don't understand. We should be paying you guys top dollar to take care of us in this small town. I love this town. I'm gonna try to do everything I can to get more involved in it. But when did all of this start happening? Going
I-
in the hole?
I think we'll sure. It's okay. Yeah, I think we'll get to some of your questions, and at the end, if you still have more. Well, we have had a significant number of presentations already, so yeah, so I'm not entirely surprised, but we would, of course, always like to see more. Yeah, so let me finish up the presentation and we'll hear from the department heads. And if you still have that question, I'm happy to follow up even further on that. We've also experienced a significant decline in cannabis revenue for the city. You can see from this graph that salaries are outpacing general fund revenue. The blue column shows that revenue is largely flat. And then in orange, it shows the cost of salaries as a percentage of general fund revenue. And salaries are outpacing general fund revenue. And there's good reason for this. When you have fewer people interested in entering a labor market, such as law enforcement or the fire service, in order to retain those employees, salaries increase substantially. And so we're experiencing a couple of different things, and it's not unique to Rio Vista. It's actually a nationwide issue with law enforcement. You know, 20, 30 years ago, law enforcement was a very respected field for folks to go into. Unfortunately, law enforcement isn't respected in the same way. And so there's not that drive for young folks to go into law enforcement like they did previously. And so because of that, when you have fewer employees or fewer potential employees applying, and you're losing the folks, you know, to retirement, that creates a higher demand. Higher demand increases salaries. And so I've seen, and you've probably seen billboards offering, you know, large lateral bonuses. And that's because of that high demand for law enforcement personnel. And the same thing more recently is happening for firefighters. And it's because, you know, some of these young folk, I hate to say it, but when, you know, they find it attractive that they can work remotely, you can't do that in fire or law enforcement. So that is a detraction from public service. And then also you have this kind of idea. I know my 24-year-old is like, well, I can be a YouTuber. And really, you know, having more structured formal employment isn't as attractive to this new generation, and it's making recruitment more difficult. And because of that, salaries are driving up. And this slide just specifically shows that our general fund revenue is not outpacing the cost of salaries as a percentage. Oh, we have some folks? Yay! Oh, good. So for those that just entered, we'll take questions at the end so that we can help maintain the order of the presentation. But thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have you. We also looked at how much revenue we're bringing in as compared to other communities from property taxes. And property tax revenue is based on the assessed value of properties. When we looked at Rio Vista's median home price values as compared to the 7 other Solano cities, Rio Vista ranks the lowest. And so our median home price as of 2024 is $461,900. Whereas Benicia at the top, their median home price is over $764,000. And so on a per house basis, we're bringing in, almost $3,000 less per house that they're paying in property tax revenue. And then we only get a percentage of that 1% as well. So it's a very small percentage of the revenue generation that we bring in. But as compared to other communities, we're bringing in significantly less than they are, while we're being expected to provide the same level of service. And so it makes it more challenging for us to provide the level of service that's expected by the community. And then this slide is just simply to show where your property tax assessment goes. So if your property is valued at that $461,000, the 1% assessed value is $4,619. We get just about 12% of that $4,619. The rest goes to various other pots. And so when people pay their property taxes, sometimes there's an assumption that it's all going to the city, but in reality, the majority of it is going to the county and the schools. Trilogy residents do pay an additional assessment to support public safety, and these residents may feel that they pay more than their share already. And while they do pay more, the city, as a result of the Trilogy community being built, we transitioned from a volunteer fire department to a paid fire department because of the age of the population needing additional services. And we also, in 2021, transitioned from having one engine staffed 24 hours a day to having two engines staffed 24 hours a day to deal with the incidences of two calls coming in at the same time and needing to provide a level of service to both callers. We also looked at sales tax revenue coming into the city as compared to surrounding jurisdictions to understand where our challenges are compared to other cities. And when we looked at it, it became evident that Rio Vista also ranks in the bottom 6 of 7 of its surrounding cities in terms of per person sales tax generation. We generate about $130 per resident per year in sales tax, whereas interestingly, Dixon generates $656 per person per year. So there's a difference of, over $500 per year per resident. And I think you see it when you go through Dixon, you see a lot of commercial establishments, you see a lot of shopping for travelers on the 80. That's all revenue generation opportunities for the city. When you come to Rio Vista, there's very little shopping. And I know that you feel that. I know residents feel like they're forced to go shopping outside of the community. And that's why I try to communicate, shop local first if you can. If you can't shop local in person, shop online. Because while we get less than if you shop in person in the community, at least we still get something. And then as a last resort, shop outside the community because then we get absolutely nothing. And so to really help fuel revenue to the city, if you can follow that motto, it is extremely helpful for the sustainability of the city. I think it's also important to note that even though Dixon is already bringing in $656 per resident per year, they're also asking for a sales tax increase because they're not bringing in enough money to sustain services. So if they can't sustain services at $656 per resident, the expectation that we can at $130 per resident is really unfair. This next slide shows the existing sales tax rates of Rio Vista as compared to our comparator cities. Antioch, unfortunately. Antioch is currently the highest at 9.75%. Benicia is asking for an additional 0.5%. And so they'll be up to 9.625% if their sales tax measure is proposed, or that's proposed is approved. Then Vallejo is at 9.25%. The existing Benicia sales tax rate is 9.125%. Sassoon City is asking for an additional 0.75%. If that's approved, they will be at 9.125%. And Rio Vista, if approved, we would be at 9.125%. Right now, we are close to the bottom. So not only are we not bringing in a lot of revenue because of the number of commercial establishments we also have a pretty low sales tax rate as compared to surrounding communities. I really support economic development, and I really think it needs to happen. Really needs to happen. And one of the reasons is because I don't want to have to come back to you all and ask for another sales tax increase in the future. And so I understand that, we're asking for a lot. We're asking for you to make sacrifices. But unfortunately, right now, we don't have a good alternative. And this slide really explains why. We generate from the average restaurant between $8,000 and $20,000 in sales tax revenue per year. From the average gas station, we generate between $50,000 and $75,000 in sales tax revenue. It would take 10 additional gas stations at $60,000 each and 34 new restaurants at $10,000 each to make up that $900,000 deficit that we're currently experiencing. So that just shows that, while I believe in economic development and I think we need to move the city forward in a way that's sensitive to the culture of the community and retains that quaint community that we all moved here because we loved, but we do need commercial development to help support and offset our continued requests for sales tax measures. But I'm not going to be able to produce that overnight. There's no way. I mean, and I don't even know if that would represent the community that the community wants. And so I think there's a balance in how much we ask for sales tax support and how much commercial development the community wants, and where does that balance lie? I certainly don't think we want to be the next San Jose, but that's just my guess. It's up to, yeah. So the city council ultimately decided to move forward with a 1% sales tax measure, primarily because the 1% is currently estimated to generate about $1.7 million. If we asked for 0.5%, it would generate about $865,000. The $865,000 would not even resolve our current budget deficit, let alone allow us to provide some additional services that the community has told us they would really like to receive. And that, I'm paraphrasing the council, but it appeared at the time that they were really wanting to provide additional services to the community and did not want to try to sell a sales tax measure that was, okay, well, we're going to ask you to pay more, but we're still going to have to cut services. That didn't seem like a good sell, for lack of a better word. And then they also decided to move forward with a sales tax measure rather than a property tax measure, because property taxes are paid solely by Rio Vista residents. Sales taxes are paid by anybody traveling through or visiting the city. And so it's not just a expense for our community, it's an expense that we can ask others to help us pay. We also, with a sales tax measure, get to keep and retain 100% of the revenue generated, rather than a property tax measure where we only get to keep a small percentage. So this provides the revenue that we need while allowing us to ask for the least amount of money from our residents. The sales tax measure also has a 5-year sunset clause, and this was built into it so that we can earn your trust. And so if the voters don't like how the money's being spent, in 5 years, they can say, we don't like what you did, we don't want this anymore. And so that provides the trust, the transparency, and to build that confidence in our voters that yes, we are spending the money the way you want it to be spent. It also includes an oversight committee that will be consist of people like you all, people that live in the community. It will not be paid consultants. It will be, Mary and Susie and Joe and Mark that live down the street. And I really encourage you, if you're interested and you have, you're very passionate about how the money is spent in particular, I encourage you to participate in the oversight committee. If you don't want to be a committee member yourself, attending the meetings is really critical because we really want to hear your voice on how you want the money to be spent. The city council, first and foremost, would like the monies to be spent to maintain existing services. If we generate the $1.7 million, we need somewhere between $1 million, maybe a little more if we were to bring back those positions that we unfunded. But that leaves us anywhere from $1 million to maybe $500,000 to spend on other improvements within the city. Some of those improvements could be improvements to our roads and sidewalks that are desperately needed, to replace our police station, which you'll hear shortly why that's needed, to fund a second fire station to improve response times, to possibly improve parks and recreation facilities and services, to increase services for seniors or economic development. And we won't be able to complete all of those at once. I want to be very clear. But based on what we're hearing from the community, we can focus our efforts so we can accomplish things one by one so that the community is really seeing improvements. And I think that's important that the community, if the oversight committee and then the city council decides that the funds should be spent, let's say, on roads and sidewalks. Every time we use those funds for roads and sidewalks, you'll see a sign so that you know where your money's being spent. If the sales tax measure doesn't pass, it's dire. We will have to make some difficult decisions, and it's not my decision. Basically, what will happen is the city council will ask staff, where can we make cuts? And we'll, essentially put options on a platter for the city council to choose from, and they'll have some very difficult decisions. This will not be a fun time to be on the city council. It will be very difficult because we already operate so thin. We will have to consider reducing police staffing, reducing fire and paramedic services to one engine, and then park and city facilities could be left unmaintained. The park and city facilities wouldn't save a ton of money, but it would be, another little sliver to help deal with the budget deficit. I'm going to turn it over to our interim public works director, Greg Malcolm, and he's going to talk about potential benefits and impacts as a result of Measure K passing or not passing.
Good evening. The Public Works Department is a very small portion of the general fund, but a critical one. And the main Public Works responsibility out of the general fund is the streets. So paved streets in Rio Vista are among the many assets utilized by every resident, visitor, and business. A good street network enhances public safety, promotes mobility, enables economic activity. The city is responsible for 27.5 miles of centerline roads And that's, the asset comprises of 4.6 million square feet of asphalt, and it is estimated to be a $20 million asset. The city participates in a pavement management program. Every 3 years, we piggyback with the MTC, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, in a PTAP, Technical Assistance Program. And what that does is they come out and they evaluate our streets, and they tell us how good or how bad they are, and they create a level of cost of where we are with our system. So in Rio Vista, with the most recent inspection information, the city's overall pavement condition is a 64, which classifies us at risk to fair. I think we all know that. The PCI is a numerical rating system from 0 to 100, with 0 failing and 100 is a brand new street. So an adequately designed asphalt street basically lasts 20 years without the need for total reconstruction. However, if conditions change, such as higher daily traffic usage, reconstruction of the pavement may be warranted sooner. Extending the life of pavement with pavement preservation as opposed to replacement pavement is the goal for a pavement management program. So we came up with 5 funding scenarios for the city, whether it be Measure K passes or it doesn't. So scenario number 1 is the existing scenario. Today, the Public Works has budgeted roughly $50,000 for actual street maintenance and repair for the physical work. That doesn't give us any money to repave streets or slurry seal or chip seal or to do any of the things we need to do under a normal pavement management program. We have the information, we just don't have the funding to do anything with it. It's somewhat frustrating. So today, if we kept the current where we are today, the PCI, which is the pavement index, would decrease to 57 at the end of 5 years. The backlog increases from 3.5 million to 6.8 million at the end of 5 years, and the overall city's index would drop to 54.9. Scenario number 2, if Measure K were to pass and the council decided to improve the streets, if the funding was roughly $350,000 a year for maintenance and rehab, the PCI could increase to 64% after 5 years, and the backlog increases from 3.5 million to 5.3 million at the end of 5 years, and it raises the PCI to 69. So, and the scenarios go on and on. There's another scenario of if we spent $500,000 a year, but right now our backlog is roughly $6 million to fix all the streets in town, and that would be over time. The worst case scenario, if Measure K doesn't passes and we do nothing, the PCI would decrease to 55%, and the backlog would be over $7 million. So it's significant. Today, again, it's frustrating. We don't do much but fix emergency portions of the road and potholes, and that's about all the funding we have to do anything here. It's I know we all like to drive on nice roads, but it's the funds aren't there to do it. Another part of the roadway system, I know we just went through the storm drain portion of that. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but the storm drain fund of 45 cents, which generates $30,000 of revenue to maintain and fix the storm drain system each year, is inadequate. So if you don't have a adequate storm drain system, it affects your streets. The streets are going to fail because the water can't get out like it needs to get. So they work hand in hand. So if we don't fix the storm drain, it's hard to fix a street that's going to fail in 5 years because the water can't get out. So they work together, unfortunately. As far as the other part of the streets, there is gas tax funds the city receives. We all think that gas tax is supposed to go to fix the streets and rebuild everything. Again, we don't receive enough funding through gas tax every year to do that. Our gas tax money goes to the PG&E bills for all the street lights. It goes to maintain and repair or replace street lights. It goes to maintain, repair, and or replace the street sweeper And the other funding goes to maintenance agreement with Caltrans for the traffic signal. So that's where the most of your gas tax money here goes to. The other part of Public Works that would be affected by the general fund is the parks. But again, parks are not essential. So if there were cuts in the department, that's one of the things we'd look at heavily would be, to reduce the maintenance of the parks. And the other thing would be all the events we do. We did over 20 events this season. It's a lot of work for our department. And most of that work is overtime. So we would really have to look at that, how this department would participate in all those events the city and we all love to do. So, and that's what I have. I don't know if there's any questions about any of that.
Call the fire department, but I live in a mobile home and I hear those poor guys going down to save people getting killed on highway.
Yeah,
12. Doesn't make sense.
truck traffic is bad. I really don't believe it's messed up, but we're at a crossroads where it's either, punt or, yeah, exactly. So,
And the man, I'm friends with the man that sold that North Bay Medical Company. And he told me years ago, because I had business here too, and Fifth and Main, I had to close due to COVID, due to skincare, massage, whatever. I couldn't make it in here. So anyway, he was telling me that he hates trying to do business in this town because his hands are always tied. And that's what that John guy was saying too. They're trying to bring money and business, and then if we can't have big stores, this looks like it's never gonna be cured. Where's all the money going? I don't understand. I guess because I've been self-employed my whole life, but I'm from Silicon Valley in Sacramento, so there is more money coming in.
yeah,
But now we got Liberty, we got Summit, where's all the money going? I don't understand.
it's all pretty transparent. If you look at the budget process, yeah, it's, and again, just like Christina said, I mean, get involved. I mean, yeah.
And to let go of these great people, that's scary as heck. I mean, I don't know, like I said, I can see the bridge from my mobile home. I lost everything in '09 and my husband lost everything. Okay, so I'm just now getting back in the game of life at 60 years old, so I was able to buy it.
Oh, good.
So I'm now debt invested. The firemen come to our place a lot too, because there's a lot of old people in this town. And there's a lot of low income people in this town like me, okay? So what's the answer? And we can't have big, it sounds like we're getting, I mean, is Lyric having to pay a lot of this money? I'm gonna have to take time, and he said he's gonna help me to take a look at things, because it doesn't add up. At this rate, we're gonna be bankrupt if we aren't already bankrupt, right?
I don't believe that. Again, I think we're at a crossroads, so that's why we're here today. Okay, all right.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so to answer one of your questions about potentially roads and what's happened, I mean, I think it's important to understand if we're not bringing in as much money as other communities, it's very difficult to maintain services. And so that's our challenge. And that's why we're coming to you before we're at the point of bankruptcy. This is, our first, that we know we have a structural deficit that we need to address. And if the voters don't want to support it, and you know what, I understand, it is a very challenging time for folks right now. Things are expensive. Inflation is expensive.
We still got 12,000 people going through every day in our nice little town, tearing up the roads. And then what are we gonna have left? We have a ghost town.
Yeah, so. So we can't prohibit truck traffic on Highway 12. We cannot legally do that. We've looked into that, and that's not within our power and authority. We also don't have the power to charge them. And so that is the challenge for the city. We have recently put signs up throughout town where truck traffic is not allowed, and that should be helpful in remediating that issue of when the bridge is up. You know, as everyone does, they try to figure out their way around the bridge being up, and then they quickly realize the bridge is up, can't get around it. Mhm. Yeah,
I had to walk home because I couldn't get my car. That is sad.
sure.
It's
Mhm.
just insane.
Yeah, so I'm going to transition to the police department, and they're going to talk about the impacts, both positively and negatively, if the sales tax measure does and does not pass to their department.
Thank you. I'm John Mazer. I'm the police chief for this week. No, I say that because I'm going to be retiring at the end of the week. But what I'm going to present is one, what if the measure does not pass? Where can the police department save money without, in it decreasing, or I should say increasing importance? We started the item of the least critical options to cut in order to help balance the budget. And then as we go down, it's what I consider to be the more critical as we go, specifically for this community. So the first item that I would recommend a cut on if the measure does not pass is reducing the staff allocations for the school resource officer. And the reason I say that, it's not a recommendation that that's a good thing. It's not. It is a duty that when the school resource officer is not present, the schools call the police. They still get a police officer. It's just not a dedicated school resource officer. It also reduces the number of officers on the street at a time because the school resource officer does help with patrol functions when traffic is jammed up. The school resource officer is frequently the first one who can clear and go respond to that as we clear the other officers from other calls. So the loss of a school resource officer would be a pretty significant hit, but it would be one that the city could survive better than a structural deficit, I would say. The next item I would recommend reducing would be our retired annuitant code enforcement officer. She works anywhere from 1 to 3 days a week. Currently, she is retired from public service and does this code enforcement function pretty much as a favor to the city. The city does have a lot of code enforcement requests, and with her level of experience, she's able to handle and manage those with the amount of time that she has allocated as a retired annuitant. So there would not be a significant savings, but that would be the next item I would recommend. Even if it saved the city $50,000, that's $50,000 closer to a balanced budget. And then the last option that I would recommend and advise against, if at all possible, is a reduction in the supervisory staff of the police department. In my past, I worked at another contract city where the staffing level only had one supervisor that worked a swing shift hours. So that they came in around noon and worked until about 2 o'clock in the morning. And daytime supervision was the responsibility of the chief. And so it's not ideal, the chief position, I can tell you, after 3.5 years of doing the job, without professional support staff assisting, it is very involved administratively. So every time I have to leave the desk to go help out on the street, it's a challenge. And it's not going to get any easier as time goes on. So reducing the supervisory positions, we currently only have 2. The industry standard is to have a supervisor on every shift, so we're already at half of the industry standard. Reducing it again would be difficult, but the city would survive, such as it is. Again, that would be sort of a last resort recommendation. The other item that I've asked to talk about is the police department itself. Is there a separate slide for that, or? So, the police department itself was dedicated in 2002, and it is a modular building. It was a construction office for the California Adventure Park, which is a item of moderate curiosity, and it was purchased by the city in 2002 and dedicated as a police department with the intent to have it in service for 5 years. We are significantly down the road from that point now. The building is 25 years old. It served as a construction office for 3 years, and now it is 25 years old, and the service expectancy of that modular building is 25 years. So we're at the end of its life on a normal basis. On top of that, because it is at the end of its life, it is becoming much more expensive to maintain. We have had roof leaks consistently. I think last year was the first year we didn't have a major roof leak. We had a minor one, and we've had mold remediation as a result of that. That has all been done when it was discovered, and significant upkeep has been performed consistently. However, and one recent repair, the repair technician noticed signs of termites in the roof of the building. So we called in a termite company out to look at the problem. They said it was a pretty significant infestation and said that the building, in order to deal with the termites, would need to be tented. And based on the footprint of the building, because it's a 6x6 modular building, was going to cost, I want to say $36,000 was the estimate. And that would require that all personnel not function in that building for 3 to 4 days. And all of our property and evidence also would need to be relocated. And that is where actually the more significant cost is, because the quote we got to hire a certified firm to come in and move all the property and evidence offsite, store it securely, and bring it back so that the tenting could occur without contaminating the evidence and property was going to cost $40,000. So the termite problem itself has a combined bill of $76,000. And at the end of that treatment, we'd still have a building that's at the end of its life. So we laid this out to the city council, and they, I think, wisely chose not to go down that road and spend that kind of money on a building that needs to be replaced anyway. That being said, in case there's any questions about it, the termites do not cause a health hazard to the employees there. They simply just are tearing up the building. So we do have a little bit of time to deal with it, but it needs to be dealt with, and it's not going to go away. It's a problem that continues until the building fails. So that is my portion. If anybody has any questions. Thank you.
But people need to know what's going on.
Mhm.
It's not good.
Yeah, thank you. I also have our fire chief, Adam Fenning, here that's going to talk about impacts to the fire department if the measure does and does not pass.
Well, good evening, everybody. As introduced, I'm Adam, the new fire chief. Little, maybe a few months older to the city than the city manager. So came here in April of last year, and then became interim rather abruptly, and then full time in August. So, pleasure to be here tonight. Share a little bit about the fire department. Just a little history of the fire department, since we have new folks in town. I don't know how much everybody's aware. So currently, we try to maintain an operating model of 2 pieces of equipment, rolling stock on duty each day. with a paramedic on each piece of equipment. Our current model before the budget was 2 people on each piece of equipment. So not the typical, most typical cities run 3, but we do 2 and 2 to cover those calls and spread ourselves out as much as possible. As mentioned, we going into this budget year, we did some adjustments to line item budgets, and then as well as we didn't fill the battalion chief, which would be the number 2 position, in order to maintain some savings. So currently, the fire department has me, and then we have the folks on the engine, and we're currently not filling overtime on a forced basis, meaning making people come back to work. We're only filling on a voluntary basis. So we are currently running days where we just have one engine with 3 people on it. With that said, we obviously have neighboring departments that we run mutual aid with. Most of the ones immediately around us are volunteer, some paid staff on during the day, but we have good relationships with them. So when we need a hand, they're willing to lend it, and when they need a hand, it's vice versa. So we will always continue to answer the call for emergency services. We'll always continue to help people change their smoke detector batteries, help put up the smoke alarms, and do that public service that the citizens here know and love of the fire department. With that said, it's pretty simple for me what the impacts would be, and that's just not, we would to continue to not fill most likely a vacant position. So as the city manager mentioned, so we have current vacancies. We're slated to have 12 staff to work the fire engines, and we're currently down to 8. So basically in the last 6 months, we've had 4 vacancies. One was a retirement. He was our second full-time employee, so we're wishing him a happy retirement. And the other 3 left for other jobs for pay and benefit reasons. So it was a pretty catastrophic departure of kind of dominoes. I will say, as the city manager mentioned, it is throughout the fire service in general. Dixon did a fire medic recruitment. They weren't able to get any. They're hiring medics and then paying them overtime to go to fire school. Vallejo is looking at doing a recruitment for upwards of 20 people, and they had last time we had a chiefs meeting, they had 15 qualified applicants. Vacaville, same thing. They were looking to hire 12, and they might be able to have an academy of 6. So it is a true problem with just in public safety in general. And if it's bad on my side, my brothers and sister in blue, I can't imagine what law enforcement is going through trying to fill. So it's in general a hard time to hire, and even harder time for a smaller city that for the young crowd wants call volumes and go to fires and do all the stuff that they're signing up for the job for. So recruitment is going to be tough. We're going through it right now, and we'll hopefully have people on board. But for us, it's pretty simple. The positions would go unfilled. I don't think I'd be speaking out saying we'd have to lay anybody off due to current vacancies. But looking at not filling vacancies is where we would be, and that most likely would lead to just having one response unit available per day. And that would just be dependent upon the availability of overtime and if we're able to staff it. So we run about close to 350 what we would call back-to-back calls or sequential calls, kind of within the same 10-minute time frame. Of that 350, about 66% are what we would consider emergent, meaning a medical to a medical, a wreck to a medical, a fire, yada, yada. Not necessarily a smoke alarm to a smoke alarm, which does happen, but we wouldn't consider those emergent. So, there are, several times, normally about every other day, where some call would get delayed. And the time of the delay would be dependent upon our availability of our neighbors, which is very dependent upon time of day of the week. And the big one for us is the city prides itself when it made the commitment to go paramedic service. Our neighbors do not provide paramedic care. Our paramedic care is provided by the fire department, and is supplemented by the ambulance. The ambulance is a private provider. So Medic Ambulance puts one ALS paramedic transport unit in the city a day. We have the paramedics because when that ambulance has to transport, which I think we're all aware is a few times a day, another ambulance doesn't come out here for anywhere from 30 minutes or more, depending upon where it has to come from. If it's just driving in from Fairfield, it's a quick trip. If the rest of the county is very busy, it might be coming from Benicia, Vallejo, Dixon, further, and it could take them longer to get here. So we rely on that paramedic care as an essential service to definitely bridge that gap when we don't have an ambulance here in town. So, and having the ability to keep two engines going is a pretty key component of that. And it's something that we like to provide, but that would be an issue that we would have to look at if Measure K didn't pass, because we don't have, as the city manager mentioned, there is no admin staff to cut. I don't have a prevention department. There's no training department. There's no fire marshal. There's nowhere else to really go other than we have me, and then we have the 8 staff that we currently have. So we would just have to continue to freeze filling those positions, which could, just lead to lapses in whether we have 1 or 2 units going a day. Calls will always be prioritized. We're not going to not go to the most emergent call because we're somewhere else. So we will always triage calls. We'll send our paramedic unit to the most necessary call. When I'm on duty, I'm handling second calls, running them with Montezuma and other districts. But that changes again, as we said, due to time of day. So for us, it's pretty simple. We may need to reduce our service. So that's a little bit about what the department is and where we're at. Shameless plugs. We have fire truck rides Thursday the 10th from 5 to 6. So us, Montezuma, hopefully the sheriff's department. I always call it the Cub, but I know it's called the Bear Tactical Assault Vehicle or something way cooler than that. We'll hopefully be there to take kids and adults who are young at heart on rides, and then we'll be all around for a Bass Festival as well. So I always like throwing out shameless plugs, but we're always here to serve and be a part of the community and provide the level of service that we're available to, and we're greatly appreciative for all the community does for us to allow us to do that. So, thank you. Hey. Once you showed up at the wrong time, you're right.
You're done. Yeah. So one of the items before we close up that I also failed to mention is that our finance department also, they're attuned to our finances more than any other department. And in understanding that, last year they underwent a reorg to reduce expenditures within the finance department. And so we've already made cuts within the finance department, all while receiving numerous awards that are more representative of awards that are received by larger jurisdictions. And I'm happy to provide those. I know that they've been provided via social media, but our finance department does phenomenal work ensuring that our finances are in order. And so we're really trying to get ahead of this. We understand that there's a problem and we don't want to be the next Stockton. I don't want to be facing bankruptcy for the city. We do have healthy reserves where we can sustain ourselves for a period of time, but those reserves are meant for emergencies. Those reserves are meant for equipment replacement. They're not meant to operate the city. And so it is critical that we look to address the city or our financial condition. And if the residents are in a position where they can't afford it right now, then we as a city need to make the difficult decisions that will have to be made. But we would really like to provide additional services to you. I hear day in, day out, needs of the community and things that they want, the city to provide. And it really pains me to say that, I'm sorry, I can't repair your road, or, we don't have a youth recreation program, or we don't have an economic development director to really, push the city forward and spend a considerable amount of effort to move forward. And we would really like to move these projects forward for the community so we could, meet the community's expectation. And I'm just hoping that the community will entrust in us for the next 5 years to give us some time to show some improvements and be willing to spend the money to support Measure K. But we're really here to just tonight tell you, the situation, explain why, and tell you the benefits and drawbacks of voting yes or no on Measure K. And I'm happy to answer any more questions. Is there anybody online with any questions? Um, Are you talking about Liberty? So, well, we do. So we get development impact fees and we get permit fee revenue, and we do get property taxes. But if they shop outside of the community, which I'm not blaming anybody for shopping outside the community, I get it, but you just have to understand that we're bringing in less money. And I totally understand it's very difficult to only shop in Rio Vista. I like people too, of course, but I understand the challenges there. But understanding that, when you shop in Walmart in another community, or Target in another community, or, wherever it may be, Home Depot, that money is going to the other community and making it more difficult for us to operate. And so we have specific challenges here. I think one other thing I failed to note is, I've been asked quite a few times, why don't we have a Walmart, or why don't we have this, and why don't we have that? And, for one, it would take the population to get larger. But for two, Walmart's not going to come to Rio Vista, and I'll try to explain why. The reason being is that most of our folks are already shopping at a Walmart in another community. So if Walmart builds in Rio Vista, they're not going to get any new revenue to the company. They're only going to get more employee costs, building operations costs, because they're already getting your money in that other community. And so that's our challenge of attracting new business here to Rio Vista, is those big box stores are already getting your money. So why should they build in Rio? Any other questions? It's quiet online. I see. The city's been
We need these people, okay? I don't understand. I'm getting really angry right now, and so I'm
Yeah.
gonna get. Okay. As long as you don't tell my dad it caused a problem. He golfs with my dad, and my dad doesn't golf anymore, he can't see very well.
So, this is not a problem that all of a sudden happens, it's a problem that's been emerging over time. It's a problem that we faced seven or 8 years ago, and you had to pass the measure vote. Same issue. We don't have enough revenue coming into our city to support all the expenses that we pay to maintain the city.
Are there any other tiny towns like us that are successful?
All our cities are having the same issue. So when you looked at the slides, you saw Dixon is asking for a sales increase. Benicia is asking for a sale, but they don't have enough. They don't have enough to provide the services that are essential to maintain a city and to do all the things that the citizens want. They have the same problems that we do. Their roads are poor. They don't have enough money to maintain them. They don't have enough money to fix them. And it just, and Yeah, and they have more revenue sources. But again, the more people you have, the more wear and tear it makes on a city and the more services you got to provide. So you got to find a balances. And that's what we're trying to do. What this will do for us, if this measure passes, it buys us 5 years to start getting our economic development plan together, to start generating those revenue sources. No, it's finding ways to bring businesses into the city. Any kind. That's what we're going to find out. That's what we're going to try to figure out. Well, maybe that's what it takes. Well, maybe if we had a good restaurant, more people would come. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, maybe that's what it takes. Maybe with some of these businesses that are starting, that's Haps Taps. Hey, Ben's Friends has been very successful. They came in, they started it. It was a mom and pop deal. They're doing fine. Haps is probably going to do fine. There's other businesses that are doing well. Okay. They're coming in. And that's what it takes. It takes a lot of those, though, to do the problem, to solve the problems that we have. But there's one thing I really want you to understand, okay? It's that the city is not mismanaging its money. The city is spending its money very prudently. It's spending the money to get the most dollars, most benefit it can from the dollars that it does have. It doesn't have enough to do everything, and that's the problem. And so we need to find ways to get more money to coming into the city. We can't cut back expenses to the extent that it jeopardizes the safety of our citizens. And that's what's going to happen if Measure K doesn't pass. So that's the message. Well, okay, I know, I get it. So I think what you have to look at is over the next 5 years, you and others like you in the city need to get involved, make sure that you come to these oversight committees, make sure the money that we're collecting is being spent in the ways that you think is beneficial for the community. And it's good. And it's not just spending the money, it's spending the money to get a return on it. So, okay. Yep, that's right. Okay.
People, they're rent, like they're rent next to the psychic. I know a lot of these people in town, okay? They say it's exorbitant, so it must be greedy landlords.
Yeah, see, and I think those are the kind of things that you have to understand. The city can't do much about that. Okay, so. Yep, and we can't. We do. We try, and you can do that too, but you can do that too. Yeah, and that's what it takes. Right? Anyway.
Yep. Are there any final questions or comments? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and I just want to echo, it's not just about salary increases for our employees. That is a very, of course, recruitment and retention, as I said before, is really important to me, but it's really about providing the services that the community wants and being able to sustain those services. So we want to provide those services. We want to provide better roads, better sidewalks. We want to provide recreation programming. We want to work towards economic development. Mhm.
Question I
Yeah.
have, these big companies have been around a long time, like Dutra and these people, that, give people jobs, do they contribute money to the city?
It depends on what type of business it is. So they pay property taxes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So where you can't see what's going on. And just another example, I was doing my walk with my dog and some guy, a younger guy, locked his keys in his car. It was fishing. He wasn't, I think he was high actually. He asked me at the Ace Hardware, I said, oh, we'll get Ace Hardware, let's go talk to my nice fireman. They'll come down and help you. They will. And so they did. I walked him over to the fire department. They came down and opened up his thing. Where did that happen? I accidentally in the freezing cold locked my keys at the Arco up there by in Vacaville. I couldn't get one person to help me. I had to get some homeless people bend my thing. I said, if I was in Rio Vista, they'd come and help me. It's nice to have that kind of a community.
That's the small town, right? That's the small town. Yeah. Mhm.
It's not good, it's a great place to live.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time tonight.